Life's funny, you know? You start off with a heart full of dreams and a head full of plans, thinking you've got it all figured out. That was me, Jane, and my husband, Alex, when we first tied the knot. We were like two peas in a pod, living in this cozy house I got from my granny, with our little bundle of joy, Lily, lighting up our world. Back then, Alex had just opened up his bakery. It was small, but it was his pride and joy. I was climbing the ladder at the company, crunching numbers as an economist. We were a team, dreaming big dreams about big houses and college funds for Lily, and maybe a sibling or two down the line. But as the months rolled by, something shifted. The bakery remained small, barely scraping by. I tried talking to Alex about maybe expanding or trying something new to boost business. Alex, babe, have you thought about maybe offering catering services? Or what about those pastry classes you always wanted to run? I'd suggest, trying to keep the conversation light and positive. He'd just wave me off, his forehead creasing in annoyance. Jane, I know what I'm doing, okay? We're fine as we are. But we weren't fine. Not really. I started taking on more hours at work, trying to make up for the shortfall. It was around then that things with Alex's mom got tense too. She'd call, out of the blue, laying into me about how I wasn't supporting Alex enough. Listen here, Jane, she'd hiss over the phone. My son doesn't need your charity. He's doing just fine without your meddling. I was taken aback, to say the least. Mrs. Thompson, I'm just trying to help. We're family, aren't we? And besides, I'm not exactly sitting on a pile of cash here. I'm working hard for everything we have. She snorted. Working hard? Please. All you care about is money. My son deserves better. Lately, things have been going south for Alex's bakery, like a ship hitting one iceberg after another. First, he had to let go of half the staff, which was tough. Those were people we knew, people who relied on that paycheck. Then, he had to cut down on production, saying there wasn't enough demand to keep things running like before. It broke my heart to see him so defeated, but I wasn't about to sit back and watch our dreams crumble to dust. One evening, I sat down with him, trying to keep the conversation as light as possible. Alex, love, have you thought about maybe bringing someone in? A consultant or something, to look at what's going wrong and help us fix it? He barely looked up from his plate, his fork playing with his food more than anything. Jane, we've been over this. I don't need some outsider telling me how to run my bakery. But it could help, don't you think? Maybe there's something we're missing. We could even consider a loan, just to tide things over and invest in a bit of a revamp. That got his attention. His head snapped up, his eyes narrow. A loan? Are you out of your mind? We're already hanging by a thread, Jane. And now you want us to drown in debt? I tried to keep my voice calm, even though frustration was bubbling inside me. It's not drowning if it helps us swim, Alex. I'm just trying to find a way to help us get through this. He slammed his fork down, pushing away from the table. No, Jane. Just, no. And with that, he stormed out, leaving me sitting there, staring at his uneaten dinner. A few months have passed, and the bakery's front door had a new sign hanging on it, closed until further notice. It was like a punch to the gut every time I walked past it. Inside our home, the air was thick with unspoken words and frustration. Alex had retreated into himself, spending days on end flipping through job listings with a scowl, his pride bruised and battered. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I found Alex slumped on the couch, the glow of the TV casting shadows across his face. Alex, we need to talk about you finding a job, I started, trying to keep my voice steady and calm. He didn't even look up. I'm looking, Jane. Looking or scrolling through social media? I couldn't help but let a bit of sarcasm slip. We need income, not just, whatever this is. Finally, he looked at me, his face set in a stubborn line. I told you, I'm not settling for some entry-level crap. I have a degree, Jane. I was a businessman. I'm not going to be someone's lackey. Your business failed, Alex. I reminded him, a little more harshly than I intended. We can't afford your pride right now. We need practical solutions. Real income. That set him off. So, what? You think I'm just a failure, is that it? You don't think I can make it back to the top? It's not about what I think, I tried to reason. It's about reality. We have bills, a daughter to think about. He didn't let me finish. Forget it, Jane. You wouldn't understand. You're just like everyone else, trying to keep me down. The argument spiraled from there, harsh words thrown back and forth until he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Not long after that mess, his mother called. As soon as I heard her voice, I braced myself. Jane, you need to do something about getting Alex a job at your place. A good one, she demanded, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. I almost laughed. Mrs. Thompson, it doesn't work like that. I started at the bottom and worked my way up. They don't just hand out high positions based on a request, especially not to someone with no experience in the field. She huffed. You need to support your husband more, Jane. He's got potential, you're just holding him back. The conversation went in circles, her accusing me of not doing enough, of not caring enough, while I tried to explain the reality of our situation. It ended with her hanging up on me, leaving me feeling even more isolated and frustrated. And so, days turned into weeks, with Alex barely lifting a finger around the house, consumed with his phone or the TV, leaving me to juggle work, household chores, and taking care of Lily. Every attempt to talk to him about responsibilities, about being a part of this family, was met with defensiveness or outright avoidance. Can you at least pick up Lily from school today? I asked one morning, hoping for a small win. I'm busy, Jane, was his dismissive reply, not even specifying what he was busy with. Doing what, Alex? What's so important that you can't help with your daughter? He just shrugged, that infuriating, indifferent shrug that made my blood boil. Just stuff. You wouldn't get it. That's how it was now. Him, wrapped up in his world of whatever, me, trying to keep everything else from falling apart. Every conversation a battle, every day a little harder than the last. Things between Alex and me hadn't been great, but I never expected to find out he was taking cash right out of my purse. It started small, a 20 here, a 50 there. I thought I was being forgetful at first, until one day, the missing amounts were too big to ignore. I waited for Alex to come home, tapping my foot, my arms crossed. The minute he walked through the door, I was on him like a hawk. Alex, we need to talk. Now. He looked tired, worn out, but the moment he saw my face, he knew something was up. What's wrong, Jane? Where's the money, Alex? I asked, my voice sharp. The cash from my purse. It's been going missing, and I want to know why. For a moment, he tried to play dumb, his eyes shifting away from mine. Money? What are you talking about, Jane? Don't play games with me, Alex. I'm not in the mood. I've been noticing for weeks. It's gone, and you're the only other person here. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. Okay. I took it. But, Jane, you don't understand, I needed. Needed it for what, Alex? Beer? Because that's all I see you doing these days. Sitting around, drinking, while I'm out working my ass off. He flinched at that, but anger quickly replaced the guilt in his eyes. I don't have to explain myself to you, Jane. It's not like I'm asking for much. Just a little cash to get by. Get by? I was incredulous. While I'm juggling bills, trying to keep us afloat? That money wasn't yours to take, Alex. That's stealing. His face turned red, and he took a step towards me, his voice raising. Stealing? Really, Jane? From my own wife? That's what you're gonna call it? Yes, that's exactly what I'm calling it. Because that's what it is, Alex. You took something that wasn't yours without asking. What else would you call it? We stood there, glaring at each other, the tension thick in the air. It felt like a chasm had opened up between us, one filled with betrayal and hurt. Before I could say anything else, his phone rang. He glanced at it and then stormed off into the other room, leaving me standing there, fuming and heartbroken. The next day, things went from bad to worse. Alex's mom called, and before I could even get a word in, she was ripping into me. "Jane, you ungrateful little witch. How dare you accuse my son of stealing? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I pressed the phone against my ear, her shrill voice making my head pound. "Mrs. Thompson, he took money from me." What was I supposed to do, just ignore it? That's exactly what you should have done. He's your husband, for God's sake. You're supposed to support each other. Support doesn't mean turning a blind eye to problems, Mrs. Thompson. It means facing them, together. But how can we do that when he's lying and taking money behind my back? She huffed. You've always been too hard on him, Jane. Always expecting too much. It's no wonder he felt he had to hide things from you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like we were living in two different realities. Expecting too much? I'm working day and night to keep us going, and he. Enough, Jane. I won't hear another word against my son. You've made your bed, now lie in it. And with that, she hung up, leaving me staring at the phone in disbelief. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about trust, respect, and the realization that maybe, just maybe, I was in this fight all alone. Life had thrown its fair share of curveballs, but nothing hit harder than the day Lily fell sick. It wasn't just a sniffle or a cough, it was one of those moments that stops you dead in your tracks, forcing you to reassess everything. Lily's fever had spiked in the night, her little body racked with coughs that seemed to shake the very bed she lay in. I remember sitting beside her, a cool cloth in hand, trying to bring some relief. The next morning, with Lily still burning up, I knew we needed a doctor. Alex was sprawled on the couch, a can of beer already in hand. It was barely 9 a.m. "Alex, Lily's sick. Really sick. I need to take her to the doctor," I said, my voice strained with worry. He glanced up, irritation flashing across his face. "So take her. What do you want me to do about it?" I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to scream. "Maybe act like a father?" "I can't do everything alone, Alex." He didn't answer, just turned his attention back to his phone, effectively ending the conversation. At the doctor's office, the news wasn't good. Lily needed medicine, maybe even a specialist. The cost started to pile up in my head, a mountain of expenses we were ill-prepared to handle. I called Alex from the pharmacy, hoping for some semblance of support. "The medicine's expensive, Alex. And she might need more tests. We need to figure this out." There was a pause before he spoke, his voice cold. "Well, what do you want me to do about it, Jane? Money doesn't grow on trees." I was stunned into silence. Our daughter was sick, and all he could think about was money? "She's your daughter, Alex. She needs us. Can't you see that?" "Of course, I see that. But freaking out about it isn't going to make money appear. You figure it out. You're good at that." Hanging up, I felt a mix of anger, frustration, and sheer determination. Lily needed me, and I wasn't about to let her down. The decision to not send money to Alex's mom that month was a tough one, but necessary. Lily's health came first, no matter what. But when Mrs. Thompson found out, the fury was unleashed. "Where's my money, Jane?" she demanded over the phone, her voice a sharp knife. I took a deep breath, bracing myself. "Lily's sick. The money went to her medicine and doctor's visits. We had no choice." "No choice?" "That's my money, Jane. You can't just decide not to send it." "What am I supposed to do?" I was incredulous. "Your granddaughter is sick, Mrs. Thompson. Doesn't that matter to you? Lily's health is more important right now." She scoffed, a sound that made my skin crawl. You're just using that as an excuse. I need that money, Jane. You're being selfish. The conversation went downhill from there, ending with her calling me names and hanging up. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling a cocktail of emotion swirling inside me. Anger, disbelief, but above all, a fierce protectiveness over Lily. The day everything turned on its head started like any other, but ended in a way I never could have predicted. It was when I stood at the checkout line, groceries piled up, that I reached for my bank card and found nothing but emptiness. Panic knotted my stomach, not just at the embarrassment of not being able to pay, but at the realization of what it meant. Alex had taken my card. For a whole week, my calls to him went unanswered, a silence that spoke volumes. Then, out of the blue, he returned, but not alone. His mother was in tow, both of them wearing smug looks that didn't bode well. Before I could even demand answers, Alex dropped his bombshell. I won, Jane. $5 million. Can you believe it? The news knocked the wind out of me, not just the amount but the sheer audacity of him claiming this victory after everything. What? How? With your card, he said, as if he had done something clever. Bought a lottery ticket. The room spun. He used my card without permission, and now, this. His next words cut deeper than the betrayal of theft. I'm leaving you, Jane. This is my chance to start over, without you dragging me down. Me and Mom, we're set. His mother, standing there with that grin, twisted the knife. Told you, Jane. You never believed in my son. Now, look at you, left behind while we move on to better things. I was speechless, the injustice of it all burning in my chest. You think you can just take that money and run? That's my card, my account. You stole from me, Alex. He shrugged, that infuriating indifference back in full force. Finders keepers, Jane. I won fair and square. It's time I found someone more supportive. Someone who appreciates me. The words stung, but it was the dismissal of our life together, of our daughter, that hurt most. And what about Lily? You're abandoning your daughter? Lily will be fine with you. I need a fresh start, away from all this. He gestured vaguely around our home, as if it were a trap he had finally escaped. I wasn't just going to roll over and let him take everything from us, especially not with money that was as much mine as it was his, if not more so. The first step was finding a lawyer, someone who could navigate the treacherous waters of legal battles that lay ahead. When I sat down across from Ms. Rivera, a sharp-eyed woman with a reputation for being a bulldog in court, I knew I had found my champion. I'm not going to lie to you, Jane. This is going to be a tough fight, Ms. Rivera began, her voice matter of fact. But it's not insurmountable. I nodded, clenching my fists in my lap to stop them from shaking. I understand. But I can't just let him get away with this. It's not right. She smiled, and there was a glint of something fierce in her eyes. I like your spirit. We'll give it everything we've got. First, we'll need to prove the purchase was made with your card. Do you have statements or any evidence of the transaction? Of course, I replied, pulling out copies of my bank statements I had brought with me. It's all here. The date, the time, the exact amount. Good, Ms. Rivera said, taking the papers and scanning them quickly. This is a solid start. Next, we'll file for an injunction to freeze the winnings until the court makes a decision. It's going to make him and his mother very unhappy, but it's a necessary step. The thought of facing Alex and his mother again made my stomach churn, but the fire Ms. Rivera had ignited in me burned brighter. Let them be unhappy. After everything they've done, it's the least they deserve. The day we served Alex with the papers, I saw him for the first time since he left. He looked different, harder, colder. His mother was with him, of course, her sneer as pronounced as ever. This is a mistake, Jane. You're going to lose, Alex said, his voice laced with a venom I hadn't heard before. I'm not the one who made a mistake, I shot back, my voice steady, despite the trembling I felt inside. Stealing from your family, abandoning your daughter, that was all you. His mother stepped forward, her finger wagging in my face. You're a greedy, ungrateful little. Enough, Ms. Rivera interjected, stepping between us with a calm authority that immediately silenced Alex's mother. This will be settled in court, not on your doorstep. After months of legal wrangling, the day of reckoning finally arrived. I sat in the courtroom, a bundle of nerves, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Across the room, Alex and his mother sat together, an air of smug confidence about them that made my skin crawl. They whispered to each other, casting occasional glances my way, their expressions a mix of disdain and surety. My lawyer leaned over, her voice a whisper of steel. Ready for this, Jane? It's showtime. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My heart hammered in my chest, a loud echo in the silent room as we awaited the judge's entrance. When the judge finally entered, the room hushed to a solemn quiet. The proceedings began, a blur of legal jargon and back and forth that felt both endless and fleeting. Alex's lawyer painted him as a wronged man, desperately trying to claw back some dignity from a life derailed. It was almost laughable, if it wasn't so tragic. Then Ms. Rivera stood, clearing her throat. Your Honor, let's not forget the facts. The lottery ticket, the source of this windfall, was purchased with stolen funds. My client's funds. This isn't a fairy tale windfall, it's the result of deceit, a betrayal of familial trust. The back and forth continued until the judge finally called for silence, ready to deliver the verdict. My heart stopped, every second stretching into eternity as we awaited his words. In light of the evidence presented, it is the decision of this court that the majority of the lottery winnings, being the result of a transaction made with funds not belonging to Mr. Alex Thompson, be awarded to Mrs. Jane Thompson, the judge announced, his voice carrying a weight that felt like a gavel to my soul. A wave of relief washed over me, so intense it left me dizzy. Beside me, Ms. Rivera squeezed my hand, a victorious smile on her face. Across the room, Alex's face was a picture of shock, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. His mother's reaction was more vocal, a strangled gasp of indignation that echoed off the courtroom walls. This is robbery. Pure and simple, she exclaimed, her voice shrill with disbelief. But her protests fell on deaf ears, the judge already moving on to finalize the proceedings. Months had rolled by since the dust settled on the courtroom floor, leaving me with a significant chunk of the winnings and a fresh start. I didn't waste any time wallowing in what could have been. Instead, I focused on the future, investing wisely in shares of a reputable company and securing a nest egg for Lily's education. She was going to have the opportunities one fought tooth and nail for, without the shadow of her father's mistakes looming over her. Alex and his mother? Well, their story took the kind of turn you'd expect when too much money meets too little sense. He bought himself an outrageously expensive car, flaunting it like a trophy. It was all look at me and see how well I'm doing whenever he got the chance. But the flash and dazzle couldn't mask the inevitable. His gambling, which started as a small-time hobby, spiraled out of control, swallowing every last penny of his windfall. Last I heard, he was drowning in debt, the fancy car long gone, and living off whatever his mother scraped together from her pension. Their grandiose dreams, deflated to the size of their cramped living quarters in his mother's old house, the two of them constantly at each other's throats. Alex never did get a job, pride and laziness anchoring him to his mother's couch as firmly as if he were cemented there. One afternoon, while Lily and I were at the park, enjoying the kind of peaceful, simple moment that had become our new normal, Sarah, my steadfast friend through thick and thin, sidled up beside me on the bench. Jane, you heard about Alex? She asked, a note of pity in her voice that I didn't need. I nodded, keeping my eyes on Lily as she laughed, swinging higher and higher. Yeah, heard he's hit rock bottom. Sarah shook her head. It's a damn shame, isn't it? All that money, and nothing to show for it. I sighed, a small part of me still aching for the man I once loved, for the father Lily deserved but didn't have. It is a shame, but we're moving on, Sarah. We're happy. Our conversation drifted to lighter topics, but as I sat there, basking in the late afternoon sun, my thoughts briefly wandered to Alex. I wondered if he ever thought about us, about the life he threw away for a shot at easy money. But then Lily called out, beckoning me to push her higher on the swing, and just like that, my fleeting curiosity about Alex's regrets vanished into the air.